Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite business reads, the book called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. All right, so like I said, this is one of my favorite reads, and I think the amazing part about this is that there's a lot of entrepreneurs that feel like that more is better, and in this book, Essentialism, it basically teaches you that the disciplined pursuit of less actually oftentimes is what leads to more and what leads to your highest level of contribution. So it feels counterintuitive, I get that, but it's really, really powerful, and it's helped me, myself, as many entrepreneurs really transform the way they approach their life and their business in a positive way. So the first thing that we have to recognize is that yes isn't always as impressive as we think, right? That's one of the things that Greg talks about. And he gives an example in the book where he talks about a situation where his wife was in labor, right? She was giving birth to their child. And Greg simultaneously had a meeting he was supposed to be involved with. And he made the decision to go ahead and go to the meeting and leave the hospital with his wife there giving birth. And the people at the meeting were like, what are you doing here? And his impression, or what he thought was going to happen, was that they were going to respect him for being there despite everything else that was going on, and being committed to the work and committed to the meeting and so on and so forth. In reality, they kind of frowned upon it. And he had to realize that saying yes in this particular instance wasn't what he imagined that it would be. So saying yes isn't always what we think it's going to be. So he talks about this concept called the yes illusion, right? So kind of similar to what we just talked about, where we think that like being a successful business owner and being a successful entrepreneur, it's just a bunch of people just saying yes to every opportunity that comes up. And that's not the case. So I'm going to drop the link below, but I had an entrepreneur, billionaire actually, come on my podcast, Jeff Hoffman. He's the billionaire founder, like I said, of Priceline, like Priceline.com. And it was interesting what he told me, because he said nothing in his career, as many of the things, there's a million things that he's done. If you look at his portfolio, it's just ridiculous of all the things he's done, not just business wise, but like charitable, humanitarian, so on and so forth. And he told me, he's like, Chris, I've never done any of the two things have overlapped. Like I've never done them at the exact same time. They've always been isolated to just one thing at a time. And I thought, going back to the yes illusion, that people that were highly successful, people that were billionaires, were just juggling a million balls. And that's not the case. And I had that validated immediately after I read this book with Jeff Hoffman. So I'm dropping that link below in the description. You can listen to that podcast episode after, but it was really transformative for me, and I hope it is for you too. So one of the quotes, this is directly from the book. It says, success can distract us from focusing on essential things that produce success in the first place, right? So many people get distracted by things, and it takes them away from what made them successful to begin with, right? So you need to really protect yourself from doing that, and I think it's really an important quote from the book. He talks about the concept of being busy, but not being productive, right? So busy is not necessarily productive. So I'm going to throw up a graph for you right here, because this is the way it's illustrated in the book, and I think it's really important. But on the left, what you'll find is this is somebody that's busy, right? There's arrows in a million different directions. They're trying to do everything. And you see that each one of those, there's very little progress in any of those areas, right? You're just doing a lot, but not really getting anywhere. The one on the right is when you're actually productive, right? So you're narrowly focused on an initiative in your business, or you're narrowly focused on one specific thing, right? Maybe it's a general direction that you're focused on in that particular area, like operations or marketing or sales or whatever. And you're making tremendous progress, getting tremendous momentum in those areas because you're specifically and uniquely focused in that particular area. So this is the way that he illustrates, and I think it's a really good illustration. I've seen many people use it since then, so I think it's a really powerful one to consider. So next he talks about learn helplessness. And in the book, they actually give an example. I'm going to kind of break it down. I'm going to show you the illustration because I think it doesn't make sense without it. But there were 3 different types of dogs they did in this study. And they were in these cages, and basically in the cage, they had these levers. So they would give like a little shock, right? Or the dogs would be shocked, not to the point that they got hurt, but they would be shocked. And if they hit the lever, like certain things would happen. Either the lever would work, then it would turn the shock off, right? The lever was broken and it didn't do anything, or there wasn't a lever to begin with. So what they found was, after a while and having them like get used to that climate or that environment of that shock and lever dynamic, what they found next was that they gave them the ability, it was a different type cage where they could go to the other side where there wasn't a shock, right? They could literally move and go away. So the ones that had the working lever, that knew they had an option, knew they had a choice, right? They left because they knew they had that choice to leave that area where they're being shocked. The one that didn't have the lever, same thing. It wasn't conditioned to think that there were no options, so it left where it was being shocked. It just went away from where the shock area was. The one that had the broken lever, right? The one that had been hitting it and nothing happened, just stayed there and just continued to get shocked, right? Because basically the element of choice was taken away. It didn't think that it had a choice in the matter. So basically the premise that he's trying to say to us is that You may think you don't have a choice, but the reality is you've probably been conditioned to think that you don't have a choice when in reality you actually do. So something to really think about. I thought it was a really interesting study and a really good example in the book. All right, so next he talks about trade-offs, right? So he talks about short-term comfort versus long-term satisfaction. So many of us, what we'll do is we'll stay for something that's short-term comfortable. So many people stay in a job they don't like, or they stay in a relationship that, whatever, just for comfort, when long-term, it's not the most satisfying thing to them. Maybe they want to go start a business. Maybe they want a better job. Maybe they want a better relationship, right? But that long-term satisfaction, sometimes we overlook that in lieu of something that's short-term that's more comfortable to us. And so that's something to really consider, because you have to analyze the trade-offs for each, right? And understand the fact that, yes, by not having short-term comfort, I'm also moving towards long-term what I'd like to be doing with my life and my personal life and my business and so on and so forth. So the key element here is to recognize that anytime you say yes to something, there is a trade-off at play. So saying yes to something means you're saying no to something else, right? So it's important to know that. And some of the best examples, which I'm going to give in a second here, from really, really powerful, notable entrepreneurs, they understood something really fundamental, which is what trade-offs are they willing to make, right? What trade-offs are you willing to make, knowing that a trade-off exists for every time you say yes to something means you're saying no to something else. So recognize what trade-off are you willing to make by making this yes or no decision. So let's go into the examples. Warren Buffett. 90% of Warren Buffett's investments are in 10 companies. Why? Because he decided early on in his career that there was no way he could make hundreds of wise investment decisions, so he decided to just focus on 10 that he could be very, very hyper-focused on and know what was going on in those companies. He's actually very involved with a lot of those companies as well. So he understood that, and is one of the wealthiest people in the world. Herb Kelleher, another example, the mastermind behind Southwest Airlines. He decided that we're not going to try to be like every airline. We're not going to offer first class. We're going to do just direct to direct. We're not going to do all these, connecting flights and stuff like that. Just one city to the next city. We're not going to have any first class, right? We're not going to do a lot of those things that a lot of these other in-flight meals, stuff like that. We're not going to do the things that other people do. We're actually only going to fly one airline, right? One type of Boeing airline plane is what we're going to fly. So that every flight attendant can work every single flight, every pilot can work every single flight. They don't have to be cross-trained in different ways. Like everybody can uniformly just be on those planes. So what he realized was that no actually equaled yes, because saying no to those other things meant that they could say yes to the things that they really, really valued, right? Like turnaround time, like efficiency, like serving their customers at a different level than other airlines were doing. They were ridiculed for it at first, and then people try to copy them. And the interesting part of that is that the airlines that tried to copy them realized quickly that it wasn't working, because they tried to continue doing everything they were already doing, right? All of the first class and connecting flights and stuff like that, multiple different planes that they flew, whatever, and then trying to just add this part of what Southwest did, and it didn't work because the core concept of it was stripping things away, doing less, but then by that doing more, right? So it didn't work for them. And honestly, Southwest became the airline that it is today because of this principle. All right, so next he talks about a principle that I think is really important. It kind of helps you kind of quantify this, because it's hard to say like, okay, yeah, maybe I kind of want to do this, or maybe I kind of don't, but it's not a distinct no or a distinct yes, right? So what they tell you to do is to make a scale of 1 to 10, right? If it's not a 9 or a 10 out of 10, it's an absolute no. So if it's not a hell yes, it's an absolute no. So 1s and 2s are easy, but 6, 7, and 8s kind of get blurry, right? So definitively tell yourself, whatever the opportunity is, whether it's a business opportunity, whatever, if it's not a 9 or a 10 out of 10, it's an absolute no. All right, so next, the kind of the point of that is no actually means you're protecting the essential. No means you're just like Southwest Airlines did, right? By saying those other things, you're protecting the essential aspects and elements of what you pride yourself and your business on. So you make sure that that's really important, is that you're not saying no for sake of just saying no. You're saying no to protect what it is that you actually do well. All right, so a couple ways to do that he suggests to do that. Something like track your activities, right? So if you want to protect your schedule, protect how much time and where you're putting yourself, track your activity, because being able to visually see all the things and activities that you're engaged in is going to allow you to say, you know what, clearly, visually, this is way more than I thought it was in my brain. All right, so another big concept he talks about, this is really important. This is really, really, really important for specifically if you're an entrepreneur, is people make the mistake of connecting or not dissociating saying no to a request as it relates to no to the person. So they think if they say no to a request, it means they're saying no to that person. So if it's a friend or it's an acquaintance or somebody you've done business with, you think you're saying no to that person when you're just saying no to that actual request. So he gives a few ways you can do that. And he talks about, making sure that you separate the two because it is inherently different. But one of the ways that he says to do that is just understand everybody has an agenda. Everybody's selling something, right? So everybody's going to do what's in their best interest. So it's your job to do what's in your best interest, not to be selfish, but again, to make sure you protect the essential. Another way he says you can do that is, at first, maybe it is something you decide, but you haven't had time to think it over, is take a silent pause. So when somebody asks you something, really take time to think about it, because oftentimes what happens is that you portray to someone and you display that you are, seriously considering what they said. So they're like, okay, yeah, he's not just blowing me off and immediately saying yes or no. He actually is thinking about, or she's actually thinking about what this opportunity entails. And then oftentimes what happens is they'll say, you know what, take some time, think about it, and get back to me, kind of thing. So take some time, take the silent pause. Don't just say yes or no and then look back and regret it because you immediately answered. Give yourself permission to just have that silent pause. The other thing too is to protect your health, right? So you protect yourself from burnout and exhaustion. So sometimes if you say no to request, you can blame it on the fact that, hey, you know what, I'm just already exhausted. We're totally burned out. I'm totally stretched thin. I just can't fit that in. So that's a really good reason to, blame it on your health, blame it on something like that you can't do it. And you should be protecting your health anyway. So it's not a lie. It's actually a valid reason that you shouldn't be doing something. So kind of the core essence as we wrap up here on this is give yourself permission to focus on the things that really matter, right? You have to make the mental shift to give yourself permission to focus on the things that you really want to do in the world. And that's really kind of the essence of what he talks about, is saying less just means that you're focused on stuff that actually matters to you. Give yourself time to think. He says that, and this is something that Warren Buffett really practices. He talks about as well is, give yourself time to think about the decisions that you make, right? We talked about the silent pause. Give yourself permission to take time to think about what your next moves are and what you're going to do, so you don't find yourself in situations that you really don't want to be and you said yes to something that you shouldn't have. Play. He talks about play. He talks about how it impacts the plasticity of your brain. It can literally rewire your brain, make you more creative. When you come back to your work, you're actually more focused and have more clarity because you gave yourself that time away. And then if you hadn't said no to some opportunities to give yourself that time, you wouldn't have that ability to find issues in your business or to find issues in your life that you want to fix because there wasn't that bandwidth that you got from playing and the creativity and all the neuroplasticity that can happen as a result of that. So the next thing he says is sleep. He talks about how Bill Clinton said that the worst decisions that Bill Clinton has ever made throughout his life is when he didn't have enough sleep, right? When he was exhausted, right? So he talks about how people make really bad decisions when they don't give themselves the bandwidth to have adequate sleep in their lives. So it's another really important thing to consider. And then we wrap up with this. This is a quote that I thought was, really impactful. One that I felt like is kind of an all-encompassing hierarchical view of what this book entails. But it says, only once you give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all, to stop saying yes to everyone, can you make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter. All right, guys, that's the end of this book review. If you guys like this, obviously subscribe for more. We're doing videos like this and interviews all the time on this channel. Also, too, I do run a digital book club. This is a very, very short version of what we do in a month. Usually we host a web class on every single book we read for that month. We do at the end of the month. It's about an hour and a half long, plus we do a Q&A at the end. We do one book a month, like I said. We do about 7 to 10 pages a day. We make it digestible. I understand as entrepreneurs, you're crazy busy. There's absolutely no way you can read, books. Our kind of methodology is don't cram like you did in high school and college. Just read your 7 to 10 pages a day. At the end of the month, you'll finish any given business book that we read. We're taking actionable stuff that we read and applying it to our businesses and making progress and seeing the result of that investment as we go along. Plus, we have a vault. There's training, there's book summaries, there's implementation kits, there's the web class reviews, everything going on in there, plus our access to our private Facebook group. So you can get all that, and I'm inviting you to do that. So if you grab our link below, you can actually get a free trial for $1, right? Pretty sweet deal. Try it out, see if it's for you, and check that out. Again, that link is below. Make sure to subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys on the next one.